This episode is proudly sponsored by Chronologic. By the time you contact a buyer with calls and emails, someone using Chronologic has already held the meeting. Learn more about how to harness the power of AI scheduling at scale. Visit chronologic.com at the link in the show notes.
We actually do a series called MoOps TV, which stands for Marketing Ops Oops. My MoOps was I had actually sent out an email with what I thought was the corrected link that ended up being the wrong link again. And so I literally yelled a very loud expletive word. And I was like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do?
I'm Scott Logan, and we're making fun of marketing. Thanks everyone for joining this episode of Making Fun of Marketing. You've got a hard job, so we want this to be a light spot in your week, and also, hear some funny stories, get some new best practices, all that good stuff. We have lots of episodes and guests coming out and that have already come out on chronologic.com/podcast. If you had fun with us today, give us a 5-star review. And as my 6-year-old starts all of his videos with,
like and subscribe if you think I can find him first try. Comment down below.
I don't even know if he knows what that means, but he says it when he uses my camera on my phone. So we'll start today with Mike Rizzo, the founder of Marketing Ops. And unlike I expected, actually, Mike, your background isn't just marketing ops, but it has sales, events marketing, strategic account marketing, which is probably an early ABM, community marketing, marketing leadership. So were you just looking for a home in marketing, discovered no one has their shit together, and you just are like, I'm going to make a marketing ops organization just to fix everything?
I wish it were that pointed, that directed, that intentional. I do have a background in a bunch of different operational functions. I think it actually speaks to the challenge that comes with being in a marketing automation, marketing operations role. So, a decade ago when the stuff was sort of coming to fruition and we didn't even call it marketing ops yet. It was like marketing email. It was email marketing, and marketing automation terms were sort of thrown around. And I think one of the things we talk about a lot at marketingops.com and the MoPros community is this idea of in this function, you can see a lot about what's going on in the organization foundationally. And for those that choose to pursue it, sometimes that turns into, I want to go do director of demand gen, or I want to go do some other strategic VP type of growth oriented function, because you're sort of getting a taste of all of that. And that's exactly what I ended up going and doing. And lo and behold, marketing operations is like too core to everything. Like I ask a lot of questions. I try to poke a lot of holes, and I always doubt the data that's being put in front of me. And so I was like, maybe I should just stick with marketing ops. And fast forward, I have now marketingops.com and a whole 3,600 person, team. Really, it's a community, but It's great.
Nice. Awesome. That was actually my path as well. Sales and then marketing ops for 4 years. And then from there, I got so frustrated that people weren't building campaigns and aligning to sales properly that I went into demand gen and then just worked through the marketing functions from the demand gen side after the ops side, which actually got me that first demand gen gig. But in that, I'm sure you've heard a few horror stories.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of them. So we actually do a series called MoOps TV, which stands for Marketing Ops Oops. I don't do this often, but I apparently incidentally coined that on LinkedIn. I think many others had said that before, especially from Seinfeld. But somehow that ended up becoming the thing. And so now we have this series called MoOps TV, where we talk to a lot of folks about the things that they've done wrong and that they survived to sort of tell the story about. My MoOps was the one that stands out the most to me was sending off an email for a webinar, and the registration link was incorrect. And I put on my marketing ops hat. I quickly tried to solve the problem by writing a redirect for the old link to the new page in our CMS portal, right? So now if anybody goes to hit the old link, they'll at least be able to get there. But the reason I had to get to that step was because I had actually sent out an email with what I thought was the corrected link that ended up being the wrong link again. And so I literally yelled a very loud expletive word. And I was like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? And I figured out I could do a redirect and then fix it later, like fix it on the back end, because I accidentally sent the wrong link twice. So that was my big MoOps, is I sent the wrong link once and then I said, sorry, here's the right link. And it was the wrong link again. I was like, I swear it was the platform's fault. It wasn't me. It didn't save.
Yeah. Of course. The platform's fault. No user error here. One thing that is changing right now in marketing ops and all ops in general is this increase in significance in the business, and where they're transitioning and combining sales and marketing ops into RevOps. Maybe there's a CRO that manages it. Maybe they're living in one side or the other. But it's, meant to align the teams better and do some other things. But I'll let you kind of give me your take on the transition to RevOps.
Yeah, look, I don't think anybody has figured out exactly the path into RevOps definitively at this point, and frankly, people don't have a clear understanding of what marketing ops is alone, right? So that's why marketingops.com, this community exists today, is that we are constantly trying to put guardrails in place on the fact that it isn't actually a demand general, or it isn't the other things that it often gets lumped into. And so I think it really starts there, right? Like, if RevOps, categorically speaking, I believe the majority of us out there would agree it is an umbrella term for what I would deem like the core sort of three functional areas of operations. So client success, sales, and marketing. And for those that are maturing fast enough to say, well, we'd like to put this under this idea of revenue operations, and we want to look at it from the perspective of basically the customer's journey and how we build that relationship through and through, and make sure that the touch points with that customer and our brand are well received across the organization, from sales to marketing and client success all the way around. Then that's great that they're thinking about those things. And I can tell you that it will go a long way if you've got those organizations aligned, even if it's just a dotted line. Right. My short story on this one is really, really large customer was going to add all of its users into the software company I was at. And I happened to be sitting in the client success organization at the time in my function. And I went over to the gentleman who had taken over my former marketing ops role. And I said, hey, by the way, I just heard that this client is going to add their 10,000 people into the product starting tomorrow. So your HubSpot portal is about to get blown up with like 10,000 people. And like that, if that doesn't illustrate the importance, right? Like, if the data is, if your infrastructure is set up that your app is pushing records into your other tools, your CRM or your HubSpot or your Marketo or whatever, right? And that person who owns that tool doesn't know that that's about to happen. Well, folks, most of our subscription revenue comes from those organizations, comes from the contact tiers that you're paying for, right? And then a whole slew of other things, right? Deliverability, all the things that come with it from there. And if that person's not in an organizational infrastructure that knows that information, that could be a wildfire really fast.
Yeah.
Right.
What would you suggest you could offer to get more into that planning discussion as opposed to finding out after the fact and it's like, oh, hey Mike, just go do this, make it happen?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think every organization has an opportunity for that. Where I started this conversation earlier around the idea that you, in marketing ops specifically, you certainly have, because frankly, I haven't been in a proper sales ops or function rather, or a CS ops function for that matter. But I do know for matter of fact, like in a marketing operations function, you often get to see a lot of what's going on across the entire business, because most of the time they're asking about some level of attribution and what's working. And so you see a lot. That's a really great opportunity for you to come up with your own hypothesis of like, hey, I believe that this particular segment performs really well, or I think we're missing out on an opportunity to enter a different segment. And you could go query and poke around, and you have all the tools at your fingertips to start asking those kinds of questions, answer them for yourself, and then raise it up to your manager or whoever it is that you want to sort of interact with and say, hey, look, I did this. I thought this was maybe a thing. What do you think? And that'll be your first sort of stepping stone into having a conversation about, I would really love to understand what we're trying to do next. What market are we trying to enter next? Or, what are the challenges that the business is faced with today that our platform that our tech stack that we have today might actually be able to help with, right? You're struggling to get meetings on the books. Like, let's go look at how to streamline that invite flow, right? If you're struggling to enter a new market because of compliance issues, let's make sure we have all the infrastructure in place to do the opt-ins and all of those things, right? And then be an advocate for your customer, right?
For me, I'm always trying to like help out the folks who are on my team, because a successful team, hopefully your manager is like this, where a successful team means that you're being a good manager. And I would want that person to come to me first. And I say, okay, here's how we need to position it. That's great. We're going to have this meeting. I'll frame you up like this. And then, I'll give you the wink, wink and pitch the idea, right?
Yeah.
Like, hopefully that's the environment you're in. But yeah, the political thing is sometimes a tightrope walk.
Yeah, it really is. I've worked for some really incredible managers that absolutely have done that kind of hand-holding, right? Like,
Yeah.
Here, let me help you massage this a little bit because I know how it's going to be heard or received or thought of, et cetera. And then it's yours, run with it. I really like, Scott, the idea that you could bring this up in a larger group setting, which can be a little nerve-wracking. Like, frankly, I really don't like speaking in front of small groups or large groups. It just really freaks me out.
Great career choice on managing a 3,600 person community. Then I'm just
yeah. My quote unquote secret co-founder makes fun of me all the time because we're going to host this big conference this year, Mopsapalooza, and hopefully there's like 500 people there, right? And he's like, you're going to have to go out on stage. Yeah. I was like, yeah, I'll probably collapse. But I do like the idea of bringing that up there. And I think, just to take that a layer back is if you don't already have a place for that, sometimes those meetings aren't architected to allow for idea sharing. So it's actually okay for you to just sit on your idea for a little while longer and then come to that next group meeting and say, hey, I think it'd be really fun if we had a moment every once a week, once a month, once a quarter to just hear from the rest of the group and let everybody share their ideas. Yeah. And then you'll be ready for that next meeting.
Yeah.
So exactly. Propose it as a schedule change to the group meeting.
Yep. Asking what you did on vacation because you can't wait to tell people you went to Europe. Something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. How would you suggest marketing ops and sales ops collaborate, cooperate, work together? Is it a redundant job? That type of a thing?
Definitely not a redundant job. I would say if you're not already regularly working with your sales ops counterpart, then you should get a regularly scheduled meeting on the calendar, minimum once every 2 weeks, just to, even if it's a 15-minute check-in, on the second meeting every 2 weeks or whatever, that can go a long way. What are you hearing? What's going on?
Yeah.
One of the things I advocate for on the marketing ops side of things is the idea of like building out your playbook. And the only way you can build out your sort of marketing ops playbook or your RevOps playbook is by interacting with those other individuals. Really good example of this, Scott, is like the director of demand gen and I sat down and the SVP of marketing is trying to understand, hey, is our pipeline, how should we sort of split out the attribution models on this stuff? Mm-hmm. Well, there's probably rules at play here, right? If a lead had come in, let's call it 6 months ago, and didn't end up converting to a deal for another, 90 days beyond that, then at what point do we sort of forego the first touch point in favor of the last touch point or what have you? And establishing those kinds of rules and alignment, really at the end of the day, they're not like rules to like take credit or anything like that. By the way, that's one of the things that people get pissed off about is the word credit.
I've also found, you were talking about attribution now a couple times. One thing that I've always found is that when you have those meetings with your sales ops counterpart, make sure that you're aligned in the weeds too, if you will. So on that note of like influencing versus not influencing, are you seeing a trend towards some type of a common model where I'm not going to put you on the spot of what's the right model, but a model where you can at least get sales on your side?
There absolutely is a way to have those two groups aligned. I was just on a call with another company this week. They were sort of showing off their product around sort of attribution and revenue and funnels and all these things, right? And I made a point to call out that at the end of the day, you're being asked for different stories that you have to tell. Marketers, depending on the need of the business, so think, startup versus an enterprise, right? The way in which you're going to want to look at your reporting for the story that you want to tell is really important. So imagine in a startup, you need to go raise another round of funding. And the narrative that you're building is that we've got product market fit, and the signups are really climbing, and here's the evidence of all of that kind of stuff. And it has like largely nothing to do with revenue, right? Because at this stage, we're not talking about the revenue piece and the revenue growth or the time to close a deal or whatever. We're just talking about this product market fit, this growth, this acceleration that's happening. And so we want to keep capitalizing on the market. Flip that, and the one number that we're all trying to work towards these days is revenue, right? NRR is like a huge focus this go around with what we're going through in the macroeconomic environment. And so, this idea of net revenue retention gets you back into RevOps. Everybody can align on revenue, and you start getting into this like, well, is it, who brought it in, who closed the deal or whatever. Look, it is one team, one dream. You do need to understand at the like in the weeds level, to your point, like what filters are you using? And that's why I was saying in this playbook, like you should literally get to the point where you're saying, when we say marketing qualified lead, we mean these things happened.
Yeah.
And when that gets sent to sales, that means that it's established as a lead. Getting into the really fine details and really specific like edge cases and certain points where you're saying, hey, if a record converted 180 days ago for the very first time, we're not going to give credit, quote unquote, to the very first touch point. We're going to go ahead and agree that whatever brought it in the next time, that's the thing that like gets the heaviest weight from an attribution perspective.
When you look at the whole deal cycle, you can track all of those campaigns. Then don't look at it from the campaign perspective. And this is, I feel like, going to help you align with sales. Is it's not this campaign was successful. It's, hey, when we closed the biggest deals or the fastest deals, these campaigns are the ones involved. Right? That's a better, would you agree that that's a better discussion to have as opposed to this campaign was successful or not?
Yeah, I think it's a much better discussion to have. It does require that you begin with the end in mind, right? Or Simon Sinek is the start with why kind of stuff, right? So beginning with the end in mind of how do you want to measure the success of your organization, you then work backwards to go back to, okay, well, foundationally, we want to be able to say that a certain number of campaigns could be helping to move deals along with the velocity and stuff like that. And if you're not thinking about those types of questions or that line of thinking or that desire for how you want to tell the story or how you want to build the narrative around your organization, and you don't think about the end, then you'll quickly find yourself, in any organization running a campaign, checking the open rates and the click-through rates and all these little microcosm activities and never really thinking about, well, how do we paint a picture that tells a story that shows success? Because it's easy to have both a success and a failure all at the same time.
Yeah.
Right. So imagine for a second that you want to do a webinar and your goal is to get a certain number of registrants, but you're also, your goals on the email marketing team are to hit certain number of open rates and click rates, right? Well, that email might perform really well from an open and a click perspective, but for whatever reason, they didn't want to register for that webinar. And so you failed on the webinar side, but on the email side, you totally succeeded. And it's like, well, the thing that we actually cared about was getting people in the door. So was the content off? Did the page break? We don't know, right? And so like, it's easy to get into the minutia of, but look, like our emails are doing great. Like think about the end result, start with the end in mind, and try to measure things like collectively.
Yeah. And if you want to secure your role and your budget, insert all the campaigns that you want to work on into the late stage opportunities and just feed that campaign those deals that are going to close anyway. And then you can increase your budget for that for next year.
There you go. Yeah. Hey, sales ops team, like which deals do you think are like most likely to close in the next like 90 days? Great. I'm going to fire off. Like, can you send this actually? Could you sales loft this out to someone? Could you sequence them?
Yeah.
Get them to sign up for the next thing.
Exactly.
Look, we did it.
Yeah. On you mentioned when you were talking about the end in mind, the velocity component, I'm still shocked at how like poorly and or differently velocity is tracked, or just lack of it. Is that something that can be more structured or more easily done? Why is it not done? Or are you seeing it being done? And maybe I've just been in organizations that they haven't done it yet. Could be too. I don't know. Maybe I'm the outcast.
Yeah, no, I don't think you are. So look, like for all of the dinosaurs that love, no, I'm just kidding. Everybody that loves to use some of the tried and true great, products that are out in market, the infrastructure wasn't built originally around this. And so like, I'll call it like it is. Salesforce out of the box isn't going to try to tell you your throughput on your velocity, right? It's just not going to. You can build it to do so. And there's lots of ways to do that are very, very tailored to your very unique business, because that's what Salesforce is good at, right?
Yeah.
All of the vanity metrics stuff, I think, is actually really, really important to pay attention to. It is really, really important signals. But it's crazy to me that somehow that movement between your pipeline is like not the thing that anybody looks at. So the number one metric in the State of the MoPro research that we run annually, okay, like 2 years running, it's demand gen. Basically, the number one KPI is essentially like demand gen. It's like funnels, basically, like lead gen type of stuff. Look, a marketing operations person can really improve the velocity that you move things through, because you got the infrastructure in place to enrich the deal, to trigger the right notification, to, whatever it is that needs to make that speed to lead factor, decrease, right? That's huge. We know if we can contact that, we've known it for 20 years, folks. Like if we can get somebody on the phone inside of that short window of time, the conversion rate goes way up, right? To customer.
Yep.
So anyway, you're not alone. I don't think anybody measures it enough, and it's frustrating.
Yeah, for sure. And what you were suggesting too, it sounded like, is to measure the time between and conversion rate you mentioned in between each marketing stage.
Measuring the full funnel conversion flow. So between stages like an MQL to SQL to opportunity, what is the conversion rate between each of those stages? And then doing things like skip level measurements. So how many of my MQLs ever become opportunities, but maybe they never really hit this interim state, right? This like SQL state, or this like SAL state, if you use that or whatever. Or like skip level on like the lead side of things down into opportunities, because there's all kinds of reasons why it'll just sort of jump straight over for whatever reason. So measuring that sort of throughput between those stages and skip level stages is like super, super important. And you should know that you can go create all these like timestamp variables in like a Salesforce, for example. So you can date stamp when those stages were hit. Depending on what product you're using, you either have to create those manually, or in HubSpot, sometimes they exist. Otherwise, that you have to add more. And when you use those date stamps, the whole point is to like understand the time in a very particular segment, so that you can then make you think about like trying to get a strategic conversation going, Scott, like we were just saying.
In that world where you have the qualified lead to opportunity, it's like 50-50 on where that process lives. Does it live with the SDR and the AE team, or is that process managed by the marketing team? Maybe it's split. Maybe some advice on how you can help co-own that, or at least improve it without stepping on toes.
The way that I've done this is with, again, I'm going to go back to that playbook type of stuff. It became sort of our guidepost, and we would align on, if you want to make a change to this process, you actually have to have like a couple sign-offs on it. I literally would have meetings where we would document that on this date, on this time, we agreed that this would be the change. This document is now up to date with the current process. And it's manual, right? But it prevents breakage.
Yeah.
Like someone decides to just randomly throw in a new status, and
there's no finger pointing. It's like you brought it to the table the right way.
Yeah.
Awesome. That's a much better answer than your SOL.
Yeah. I mean, look, that's the thing with all of this technology. I think you and I talked about this when we were hanging out last or what have you, but we were all hawked a bunch of products like over the last 10, 15 years, right? And the sales folks were selling us magic. And the reality is that like, I've just got done explaining, and you and I have got done talking about how important it is to like have a process in place to go have a conversation with another person that owns the tool, right? That owns the process. None of it can be done without people.
Awesome.
And so,
yeah,
you got to have the people.
Yeah, for sure. Well, great. Well, we talked about a lot of really key points here, so I'm going to try and see if I can summarize it. Definitely use your data to back up ideas and to find ideas, and coordinate and validate that with your sales counterpart, or if you're in sales ops, your marketing ops counterpart. And you can elevate your position by bringing those to light in the right way. Add better tracking and improve tracking. Like, how great would it be to go to a sales ops person and say, hey, I figured out a way to track the velocity between each stage, and here's what it looks like. And, marketing leads are the same way. And did I miss anything in there?
No, just alignment, like documentation is key. I think that was sort of an underlying thread that kept everything pulled together. So wherever your documentation lives, just make sure it exists, and
utilize that to align. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us today, Mike. That was a really valuable discussion. That was really awesome, the insights that you brought. So please check out marketingops.com to get more of the ops-focused content. Thanks for joining us on Making Fun of Marketing. Again, hopefully this was a bright spot in your day, because it's not always fun, especially if you're stuck in Storage Room B in Ops and you ended up getting a seat at the table and called yourself RevOps. More podcasts, episodes can be found at chronologic.com/podcast. Give us a review, subscribe, do that whole thing, and have a great day. Thank you for joining us, Mike.
All right. Thanks, Scott. Thanks, everybody.
Hopefully this was a bright spot in your day. You can go ahead and listen to more episodes at chronologic.com/podcast, and give us a 5-star review and subscribe if you just want to hear more and get it fed to you. Thank you. Have a great day, everyone.